Everybody. Welcome to week 4. This week we are talking about one thing and one thing only, the running record. Running records were developed by Maury Clay from New Zealand, and a running record is a standardized process for coding, scoring, and analyzing a student's precise reading behavior. Taking running records of children's reading behaviors requires time and practice. Lots and lots of practice. You're not going to be proficient the first time you take a running record or the second time. It takes lots of practice. But once you've learned it, the running record is a quick, practical, and highly informative tool to use in a literacy classroom. You're not only documenting the students' reading behaviors for later analysis and reflection, but you're also sharpening your observation powers and your understanding of the reading process. That running record will inform not only the selection of an appropriate book, but the specific emphasis you need to prioritize for your readers. If you look at figure 11.1 on page 258 of our text, Fountas and Pinnell list purposes of running records. For example, it might be to assess text difficulty, group and regroup for instruction, select appropriate texts. It might be to inform the introduction of a text. And there are several more listed, so please be sure and take a look at that. When you are taking a running record, you are sitting beside the student while the student reads a text that has only been read once previously. So if you're having guided reading on Monday, you introduce a new text to your entire guided reading group. Everyone in that group is going to take home that new book that was just introduced, except one student. That is the student that you will do the running record on the next day in your guided reading group. If you have questions about that, please ask. We only want the child to have read it previously one time the day before. At the early levels, you're going to code the entire text because the texts are so short, usually between 150 to 200 words. At the upper levels, you still only code 150 to 200 words, but then the students finish that text silently by themselves. Again, you are using the new book from yesterday to take the running record today. Watch the student closely as the student reads. You're going to be coding behaviors on your running record form. Your job is a neutral observer. There is no instruction whatsoever during the running record. And I know in one of the videos for this week, there is some instruction going on during the last minute of the video, and that should not be there. When a student needs help to move on, the most neutral thing that you can do is say, "You try it." If the child still doesn't try anything, you tell the child the word. Following the coding, you're going to have a brief conversation about the meaning of the story. You might talk about how the reading sounded, and you're going to make a teaching point. We're going to be focusing on, in this class, taking the running record using paper and pencil. All right, on page 259 of our text, Fountas and Pinnell talk about coding the reading. As the child reads accurately, you put a check mark for each word accurately read. Mismatches are recorded with a line. What the reader says is above the line, and text information and all teacher actions are below the line. This will become more apparent as the coding system is explained. If you look at figure 11.2 in our text, and these are the codings that we're going to use for our running records in this class, you can see what you do for an accurate reading. You put the check mark above the text. Now, Fountas and Pinnell, on their running record form, do not have the words printed out. They use a blank piece of paper because you should be able to take a running record on any text a student is reading. And that's what I was saying. It takes a lot of practice to be able to do that on a blank sheet of paper. If the child substitutes an incorrect word, such as worry for wonder, worry is above the line, the actual text is below the line, and that counts as one error. Multiple substitutions. Sometimes students say something that's incorrect. They say something that's incorrect again, and maybe even a third time. That would be if the actual word is species. The child might say speckles, spices, spectacles. That would be counted one error for each word. If the child says attic for Arctic, that error is only counted the first time that it's said in the text. If every time in the text the word Arctic is read and he says attic, you only count it the first time. Names and proper nouns are only counted as an error once in a text. They show you how to code self-corrections, insertions, omissions, repetitions, repeated repetitions, rereading, appeal. If the child verbally says, "What's this word?" you're going to say, "You try it." A told is marked with a T under the line because that's a teacher behavior. It shows you how to code spelling aloud and sounding out. If you go to resources.fountasandpinnell.com, you are able to download all of these forms. Here is coding and scores scoring errors at a glance that you can download and print. I would highly recommend you do that. A guide for observing and noting oral reading behaviors. We're going to get to this momentarily, so I would highly suggest you print this out also. And here's an alphabet linking chart that you can save and print. All of these you can upload or download, whichever is the correct term. I always get those mixed up. I would suggest you do that. Again, it's resources, fountasandpinnell.com. On page 260, they talk about scoring the reading, which is where we're looking at counting the errors so that we can determine the accuracy level and the self-correction ratio. And there are apps that will do this for you. This is the old-fashioned way to figure it out, which I would suggest you try to do before you try the app. On page 262 is analyzing the record, the qualitative analysis. What sources of information does the reader use? This is where it comes into the MSV, meaning, structure, visual. Does the error make sense? And when I say that, does it make sense up to the point of the error? We don't go past the error. It's only up to the point of error. Does that attempt make sense? If it does, the child is using meaning. Does the attempt sound right? Is the syntax correct? Again, up to the point of error. If it is, then the child also uses structure. Does the attempt look visually similar? Are there similar letters in the child's attempt and the actual text? If there is, then that is a visual cue that was used for that error. And this part, the MSV part, it can be very difficult. Oftentimes, and I've done running records for a very long time, oftentimes I would think about it and think about it and think about it. And I would always go back to my first analysis. So don't become frustrated by this process. Once you have it analyzed, then you want to look at this. Guide for observing and noting oral reading behaviors. Does the child reread at difficulty? Does the child attempt something? Does the child use visual information to solve those words? Does the reader notice when the sources of information do not match? Is the child self-correcting? Is the child reading fluently? The remainder of our chapter for this week is loaded with information. Please read it carefully. If you have questions, please ask me. Figure 1113 on page 273 is a summary, coding, scoring, and analyzing running records. If you have questions, please ask me. Thank you.